Hello, everyone, and welcome to PC Tech Spec. This is our pilot episode, and today we're going to be talking about putting in money to your old OEM computers. First things first, we're going to talk about our computer that we have. It is a Compaq Presario SR5123WM, and this is a full-size desktop you could purchase back around when Vista was available. Actually, the one we had came with Vista, but I installed Windows 8.1 over it because Windows 8 is a lot smoother and a lot better for these specs than Windows Vista was, because Windows Vista was actually quite resource demanding at the time. This computer comes with 2 gigabytes of DDR2 RAM and a 320 gigabyte hard drive. These are all pretty standard about this time. Oh, and don't forget the 250 watt power supply. This is all good and well, but how much money can we put into this? The processor is an AMD Athlon 64X2 4000 Plus, and this isn't the greatest processor, but we can actually upgrade it to a 5600 Plus for a decent performance boost, and I'll put a picture up on screen so you guys can see how much better it is. We're also going to add a GT 240 graphics card to this build, and that cost me around $1850. And the Athlon 64X2 6500 Plus cost me about $7. So this total comes to about a $25 old OEM upgrade. We're going to see how well this can handle a couple of modern titles. These are sort of modern, but I mixed in a couple older ones because this hardware is not the strongest available. First up, we have League of Legends on very high at 1080p settings, and these are all going to be at 1080p. It's averaging about 52 frames per second in the action, but there's a lot of jittering and stuttering when you're trying to move across the map and you're doing a lot of fast-paced things because there's low RAM and VRAM in the system, and that's going to be a big problem. So we set all these settings down to very low, and we saw only about a 14 frame per second boost up to 66 FPS average in the action. So this rig is not the best even after upgrading, and I'd say you could probably set all the graphics down to very low except for the terrain because you want the game to look at least somewhat good when you're playing it. Next up, we have Killing Floor at max settings, and we saw 36 frames per second average in the action, so this wasn't quite great, but there wasn't as much stuttering as there was in League of Legends for some reason. But this is a first-person shooter, so there's less things to load at the time. That's what I can assume. So we dropped it all down to the lowest settings, and we saw an average in the action of 75 frames per second. This is much better. This is double the amount of frames per second we saw on the max settings. Even though the game does not look very good, you can get very playable frame rates, and we saw it maybe dip to about 60 and a little below that in the heavy action. But if you can get away with it, this would be a great upgrade for $25. Last but not least, we picked a game that's not very popular or well known, but it's based on the Source engine, so it gets similar frame rates. We picked Double Action Boogaloo for a very fast-paced third-person shooter, and we saw on max settings average of 50 FPS, just kind of idling, and 38 in the heavy action. So that's not too terrible if you don't mind 30 frames per second, but we wanted to see what we could get on the lowest settings, and we saw about 56 frames per second average and 42 in the action, which is not a great boost. I would recommend leaving it on the max settings because the game does not perform that bad. There was quite a bit of stuttering in the heavy action and when moving around quickly, but I'd say this is quite playable. So these were just a few things that we went over in this test, and you might have a system that's a little bit better, you might get a better deal, but for $25 for a processor upgrade and a dedicated GPU, this was quite good. But I would not recommend you go out and buy it and add it to your old system. If you can save up just a little bit more money, you could get a lot better in terms of performance. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Please leave a like, feel free to subscribe, and a comment down below if you got something interesting to say, or maybe I said something wrong, I don't know. This is kind of weird. I don't normally do things like this, but I'm excited to get started and get new hardware in and do some comparisons for you guys. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I hope you have an excellent day.